So let's talk about the differences between negative personality traits and positive personality traits. And I'm going to use the example given in the Bible in a couple of scriptures. So the positive personality traits, I think the most commonplace that we would think of is in Galatians, and that's the fruits of the Spirit. So if we think of fruits of the Spirit, peace, love, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control, those are all positive personality traits. The verse that comes to mind when I think of negative personality traits would be Proverbs 6, talking about the seven things that God hates. So some of the personality traits that are described in Proverbs 6 would be lying, arrogance, deceitful behavior, bearing false witness, one who sows discord among the brothers. And so let's add to that list jealousy, resentment, contempt, always playing the victim, always seeking attention. So those would be negative personality traits. And you're probably going to hear me say this again and again and again. We're not looking for one thing to classify somebody as one way or other. We are looking for a pattern of behavior. You know, if somebody lies to you one time, okay, it might have been a one-off. If somebody acts arrogant, maybe you stepped on a trigger from, a wound from childhood. Like, all of us are going to have negative behaviors from time to time because we're human. But what we're looking for here is a pattern of behavior. So if you're around somebody who, for the most part, walks in the fruits of the Spirit, they're kind, they're gentle, they're showing you by their behavior that they're a good person, that they're walking in a good spirit. If you're seeing behavior that is showing you jealousy, resentment, contempt, always playing the victim, and this is a repeated pattern, this is where you need to start stepping back and objectively looking at what are my eyes seeing. Don't listen to what they say, because if you're dealing with a manipulative person, they're going to say all the right things. You need to look at what they're doing. So let's just talk for a minute about why somebody may have a pattern of bad personality traits. So let's say that you meet somebody and you're starting to see, you've experienced some gaslighting. You've noticed that they've, maybe dismissed concerns. You're seeing arrogance. You're seeing a resistance to receiving correction. So you're seeing all of these negative personality traits. But there's something that shows you that they're compassionate. Let's say that you have watched them when they don't think they're being watched, and you see them doing something nice for somebody. You see them showing compassion for somebody. That's somebody, okay, so let's back up. There's two main reasons that you're going to see locked in negative personality traits. Number one, you might be dealing with somebody who has a personality disorder, and we will go into that more down the road. You may also be dealing with someone who comes from an abusive background. You may have a combination of both, because the reality is, if you're dealing with somebody who has a personality disorder, a lot of those stem from childhood abuse and neglect. So those are the main two places that you're going to see these negative personality traits. So if somebody is showing you this pattern of behavior, just know, and this is where, again, you really need to hear me on this. Somebody that's exhibiting contempt, jealousy, resentment towards you, anger, lying, they're using manipulation, they're dismissing you. These behaviors are not going to change. You are not going to change this person. And so you really need to make a decision on whether to keep this person in your life. Now, this is going to change, obviously, if you're talking about a spouse or a child or a parent or something like that. If we're talking a church or if we're talking a friendship, it's, the answer is pretty easy. You can just go to a different church if we're talking toxic church leadership, or if it's a friend, you may have to exit the friendship. I'm not going to get into the situations where you might be seeing these behaviors in a spouse or a child. That's for another video at another time. I just wanted to simply point out and help the person hearing this to, again, you're going to hear me say this again and again, pay attention to what your eyes are seeing. If you're seeing this pattern of behavior, this is not going to change. These behaviors, a lot of these type of behaviors, this contempt, this jealousy, this stems from a person's deep, deep character. When you're talking character traits, you are not changing that. God can change that person, of course, and we can pray for them. We can pray for God to soften their heart. We can pray for God to change them, but you are not going to change them. And take it from somebody who has spent a lifetime trying to convince herself that if I just explain it better, if I just act nicer, if I just do this, you will catch yourself in this perpetual loop of thinking that it's something that you could do differently to change this person. You need to step outside of that. You are not going to change this person. So again, this is going to be a pretty short one. You need to understand that negative personality traits, especially when you see multiple in one person, you're either dealing with somebody with a locked-in personality disorder or you're dealing with somebody with an abusive past. And I will tell you that even if you're dealing with somebody who simply comes from an abusive past, you still have to ask the question, especially if you're talking like a friend or a coworker or somebody you go to church with, or maybe church leadership, those are still not traits that you're going to change. Abusive pasts create negative communication styles. They had to operate in such a way in order to survive. But those can also get locked in. So what I want you to hear, what I want you to take away from this is you need to stop dismissing and explaining away bad behavior. You need to look at it objectively and just know that you're not going to change it, and you need to make some decisions.